You're listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box, where you get the inside scoop on the steps action takers and decision makers take to align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. Each week, you'll hear from remarkable guests who have overcome challenges and obstacles to succeed in the face of adversity. By listening to their stories, you'll get practical tips, tools, and resources you can implement today to bust through your own internalized prisons of worry and doubt. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Welcome to this episode of the No Labels, No Limits podcast, a podcast all about helping action takers and decision makers like you align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. Hi, I'm Sarah from Sarah Box Coaching and Consulting, where we help nonprofit executives lead strategically and achieve impact in the world, all while staying heart-centered and true to who they are. I'm a former executive director, a believer in people and possibilities, and the best-selling author of The Changemaker Ripple Effect, a book all about how one person's drive, purpose, and ambition with boldness can impact thousands. So joining me on today's episode as co-host once again is the marvelous Beck Japovich. Beck is the founder and principal of Beck Japovich Communications, where she helps purpose-driven people craft their brand voice. And we're here to tell you that the life you want is possible with the right support, mindset, and strategy. Beck?
Hey, Sarah. Before we meet our guest, I wanted to share 2 more 5-star reviews of the show. This one is from 808LC. Curious name, huh? Well, here it is. It says, out of the box. Sarah is an excellent interviewer and she finds guests full of wisdom, tips, and tools to share through their stories. If you're looking for some jaw-dropping inspiration to keep you living your no labels, no limits, no excuses life, you found it. And the second one is from RunDMC19. Thanks for that cool name, who cheers us on with this. Empowerment, podcast sharing women's stories of success in a fun and inspiring way. Great job.
Well, thanks so much for sharing both of those reviews. You know, Beck, it's really nice when people review because it does a couple of things. It helps us get the word out to other people. Plus, it's just kind of fun to read what people take away from our work when, you know, we're talking into a void when we do these interviews. We just don't know. So on today's podcast, we are being joined by Andrea Rowe, copywriter and communication strategist who lives with her husband and 2 children on a sand dune tucked into the corner of a coastal national park on the southern edge of Australia. She is obsessed with finding the right words to connect people and purpose. She is a professional copywriter of newsletters and communication strategies for some of Australia's and New Zealand's most respected not-for-profits and charities. And I meant to say most respected, not most respective. She has firsthand knowledge of nonprofits as the proud founder and president of the Peninsula Writers Club, which serves writers in the Mornington Peninsula of Victoria, Australia. Now, some of us dream about working from the road. I'm one of those people. And Andrea's done that. She has traveled Australia twice with her 2 kids and husband for months on end. Now, if you're not familiar with Australia, that is not a small continent. So I have questions about that. But all the while, she worked from their camper trailer, and it was an experience that she calls the best adventure. If that's not inspiring enough, on the weekends and by the light of the midnight riding moon, Andrea is also a children's author with her first book out in January 2021. You know, I'm just kind of inspired having read all that to all of you. In this episode, though, you're going to hear how Andrea knew from a really young age that words and stories were going to pave her way, how she narrowed her skills and experiences to zero in on her passions and priorities, and then what happened when she did that, and how she manages her family, health, professional, community, and writing while traveling around Australia, living in different countries, including the US, Canada, and France, and managing her rheumatoid arthritis. So now, with all of that, let's welcome our guest, Andrea Rowe. Hi, Andrea.
Hello. Gee, I'd like to meet her too.
I know, pretty fabulous.
I know. And I have to say, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast here because, we've been in the same copywriting community for a few years, and I just find that your presence and your generosity to help other people is just so inspiring. And it's wonderful to be speaking to you today and learning more about your story and sharing your story with America and Australia.
Thanks, Beck, so much. And I really, I'm lucky that I just get to hang out and connect and chat to so many great people.
Well, with that, let's just dive in. Andrea, do you have like a non-negotiable or a ritual or habit that you do daily that keeps you focused towards your big vision?
Mine is extremely simple, but I need to get up before anyone else in my house. I need to have a very strong cup of tea, and it needs to be in a teapot, and it cannot be a tea bag. I am a leaf girl all the way, loose leaf, and I need to have a strong cup of tea no matter where I am in the world. My friends laugh at me for travelling with a Ziploc bag of tea, and a notebook. I'm always seem to have a thought as soon as I wake up. But if I can have that moment before anyone with tannin.
You're coffee though, right?
The world is cool.
I have coffee, yeah. But I understand the tea. I mean, it's just a certain refreshment. I get that. And it's, it's got that whole ritual behind it as well, making it.
For me, I think starting my day with a pot, with my leaves, waiting, then I have to actually wait till they brew. It's a nice way to start, but also it gives me an excuse to I just need to get up before anyone else in my house. I'm with my teapot.
I love that. It's patience and clarity. There you go.
I love it. So, Andrea, can you kind of start by telling us how your love of words and storytelling actually shaped your education and career path?
Sure. Well, I loved, like all good bookworms, I loved great reading as a kid, and I loved being lost in books and the power of a wonderful story that can just sweep you away and draw you in. And for me, I think I recognised very quickly that words was a great connection and a way of understanding things that didn't often make sense to you. So from a young age, I was always writing and writing, school newsletters, church newsletters, you name it. If someone had some information to get out, I was wrestling it from them to write it. And it took me very quickly into doing a lot of speeches, and we call them things like Toastmasters and things like that in Australia. They might be internationally as well. But I was always talking and writing the words that we needed to talk. And then from there, I went very quickly into university to do a media degree. And my dream was always to be a journalist. So I went very quickly into radio production and news reading. I enjoyed it, but I knew there was other ways of shaping a story and shaping the words. So I had a roundabout travelling life, and then very quickly found my way into media, marketing, PR, and a media advisor for a government minister as well, and in a media role. So that was all really about finding words, finding a narrative, finding a way to shape discussion and dialogue. And there I moved into my own business eventually too. So words have been my constant companion in life. I love them.
So when you're writing for your clients now, are you still doing like the speeches piece, or when you say copywriting, is it really even niched down more than that?
So I niche very much so with not-for-profits and impactful organisations. So organisations and associations that are trying to either advocate for change or representation. So a lot of that copy that I'm writing can be a mixed bag. Often it's newsletters. Sometimes it's CEO speeches. Sometimes it's annual reports. It might be websites and blogs, or often it's campaign material that are particularly focusing on the need to connect with the wider public to get them on board or seek funds as well. So quite a mixed bag. And sometimes it's even social media content to sort of build up that narrative that that conveys the why and the wherefore of an organisation as well. So I love that variety, because you have to exercise different writing muscles or try different writing styles for the different ways people are coming to that information or where they're even reading the material.
Let's make up a mythical nonprofit, which is probably similar to many you've worked with. They have multiple audiences, right? Mm-hmm. They've got their board, they have their internal, the externals, people who don't even know about them. But, you know, if you said something about what their purpose was, they go, yeah, that sounds great. So typically when you start working with an organization, Andrea, how broad do they come and say, we need you to do everything? And how much do you have to help them really focus in on what's their purpose in writing, so that you're really helping them understand how to hone the message to get the results?
Sure. Well, particularly I find the emerging or the startup not-for-profits are, where do we start? How do we convey everything? So, and then of course you've got the more focused areas where they're coming to me saying, we have a campaign that we need to speak to X, Y, and Z, or we're trying to articulate this program to present it back to the board. So, it's funnily enough, I quite love both approaches. I think it keeps me on my toes, particularly with the emerging not-for-profits. It's often sort of unpacking a strategy for, okay, what can we do in the short term and then the long term? So what can we do in the first year of your existence? What are we aiming to get to by year 2, year 3 and year 5? So often it's kind of a staged strategic plan, so to speak, where we say we want all of that, but realistically, with funding and with time and resources, we can only do this. Here's where you'll get more bang for your buck, or here's where you're best putting all your rabbits into this hat, speaking of the rabbit hole. And for the more specific ones, I think for those guys, I really like to unpack and understand the audience's motivation. So if it's something where we've got to represent something that's got to go through the board hoops, it's, what the board's questions often are, so I can understand, do I need to bring more stats and figures and research into this so that we can sort of see how the board can be on board. But at the end of the day, it comes down to understanding what that audience's questions might be.
Beck, you work with a lot of entrepreneurs as well. Does that sound pretty similar to your approach and your thought process when you're doing copy and helping people think through? Because what Andrea is sharing is very strategic, as well as having a great product. I'm just wondering if your approach is similar or if you see it different.
Yeah, it depends on who you're working with, definitely, and then what the budget is that they've got. So I feel like when I'm working with companies that mightn't have a big budget, there's not a lot of strategy that we can put into that time that we're working together. So sometimes the client won't have that budget. So then the focus is on the audience's mindset and all of that Andrea was speaking about. But I really enjoy doing the strategic piece. So I do, bring it in as much as I can with my clients, because, without a strategy, you're just talking narrative, and I don't feel like you don't get the traction, to make the change that you want. And I think, in Andrea's field of not-for-profits, that's so important. You need to have that bigger picture, because you're trying to make an effect in the community and in society. And some of the businesses that I have, they're not, that I work with, they're not about that, So it's quite similar and different.
And that's what I find interesting, Beck, is that some of my clients, a bit like you, they don't have the budget either for the strategy. Mm-hmm. They might just have a small pocket of funds for this financial year. But and I do appreciate that and just roll up the shirt sleeves and get in and do what they need. But I kind of can't help myself often there too.
What I like about what both of you said, you both do the strategy when you're able to, like the more in-depth piece of it, when it's possible. But that always does, for me, strategy really is based on answering the question, why? Why are we spending this money on a project right now? Like, what's your objective for this? So whether we may not have time to do a whole plan around it. If we're not clear on why, we're just kind of doing effort, right? Well, we don't know if it's having any kind of impact. So
absolutely.
Exactly. So Andrea, I want to know, how did you narrow your skills and experiences to zero in on your passion and priorities? And what happened when you did?
Sure. Well, I think, look, I'm a humanitarian at heart, and I am always drawn to something that can make a difference or can really connect. So for me, the journey was more about, it kind of found me unintentionally or accidentally. I was a minister's media advisor, and I was working for an environmental agency as their media manager. Went off to have children, moved to a more regional area. After the second child, I decided I didn't want to keep commuting and returning back to my corporate life, and thought I'd have a little bit of a break and just diddle about with my books. And then I used to work with a lot of not-for-profits and community organisations through the environmental agency I worked with, and through the minister. So sort of one person tapped me on the shoulder, then the other one started tapping, and I thought, well, actually, maybe I could sort of set this business up from home. I'd never thought about that for myself, but maybe this might work for me. So it was sort of this accidental two-step that started to happen, and then it sort of snowballed very quickly. The next not-for-profit recommended me to the next one, and obviously I was delivering the goods and people were happy with that, and it worked around my lifestyle, but also more importantly, it worked around my value set as well, so I could accommodate sometimes, areas are a little bit grey, but I accommodated that because it worked around what I felt sort of matched my idea of, a life that I wanted to live. So that's sort of how that's flowed really from me. So
I'm curious about what your favourite campaign is that you've worked on with some of these not-for-profits. And if you could talk about that.
Look, I think I've got a soft spot, obviously, for the environment and protection of wild places and special places that, are placekeepers of history and culture and fantastic animals. So I have a lot of favourites, probably one special one, only because it was so unique and so special. And this was many years ago. I'm married to a park ranger, and we went to Canada to live on a ranger exchange, and I managed to end up working with a not-for-profit in Algonquin Provincial Park, and that was an amazing experience in that I was writing all of their material that were actually saleables that helped fund a lot of the naturalist programs in the park. I was learning to speak slightly right in a different voice because some of the vernacular that Australians use are not what Canadians use. Plus, I had to write material that was bilingual, that was translated into French Canadian.
I love that. I love that about copywriting and the work that we do is that you are like learning to write in different vernaculars. Like I have some US clients, and I love it. It keeps you on your toes, like you said, keeps your mind active.
Tired of feeling stuck and ending with the same result? Want to know how Sarah can help you with one-on-one or organisational coaching? Then book your free discovery call at sarahbox.com/contact. Now, back to the show.
And so your husband is a park ranger.
Yes, the man.
Which is awesome. That's so cool.
It is awesome. It's given us lots of experiences and adventures. He's been a park ranger for 30 years. So when you marry a park ranger, you're marrying someone with a vocation, not a job. So it's certainly brought a lot of goods and bads into our life, predominantly goods.
So, you've got this business now, you're working more flexibly, you're not going back to your corporate life, and you've got a husband who can sort of pick up a job anywhere, I suppose, being a park ranger.
It's more, so we've lived in lots of different fantastic locations, but we're pretty much settled on our little corner pocket in the sand dunes down here of the end tip of Australia. At the moment, never say never. But when you work for a government agency for a long time, you have long service leave. So we've had a couple of incidences where he's had a really extended long service program. So you're paid to be on an extended holiday. So we've just sort of basically gone, well, it's time to take off. So 5 years ago, we ticked the box of the family dream of let's pack up the family and hit the road and see how far we can get. And that was American Canadian terms, it's 15,500 miles. So in 7 months. So that was fantastic. So it's 25,000 kilometres. Last year, we hit the road for about 8 weeks or so, filling in the dots of the map that we didn't get to last time. So for me, the first trip, it was really important. My business was at a really healthy stage, and I needed a holding pattern to happen. So I spent a lot of time looking at how some of that holding pattern could call in other specialists to help me keep things ticking over, and how others could just be still me doing the work. It was very interesting because we certainly weren't living in a lot of comfort in a very pokey little camper trailer, and often areas where there was no internet, so you had to go to sort of rocky outcrops to file a story. But what was fantastic about it was along the way I picked up clients, and that's how I picked up one of Australia's top charity, the Royal Flying Doctor Service. They started noticing some activity that I was doing on social media about my Royal Flying Doctor's observations along the way, and so when I got back to Victoria, eventually they had a meeting with me and asked me to start developing some strategies for them, and now I write their kids club, and then I developed a kids club program for them, so I write that newsletter as well. So
wow, that's fascinating.
The second time around, though, I decided it was too short a time to keep working, and I'm at that stage with kids where they're about to not want to hang around with us, so it was really important that I really put the business on hold. But it was 8 weeks, and every client was willing to wait. So I was delighted with that I could still retain them. So it was worth doing, but it was a lot of red dust out there.
So did you have a team or some support keeping things going in the background while you were gone, Andrea?
The first time I had a number of trusted colleagues where I either sort of had part management, they did some work for me, and then I sort of quality controlled or took in the brief and then took elements from it. I also had a couple of people that I could call on if I felt like I was just not able to fulfill the brief at the last minute. But there were a couple of times where I just said, no, this job's all me. I really need to do all of this. So we'd look at the map and find a, Broome at the top of Australia or somewhere else and say, right, we're going to have to live in a caravan park for 10 days and my husband will just go off and do the road trips with the kids, and I'll just smash it out and find a camp kitchen and get it done. So not look anyone in the eye because everyone's in holiday mode, and if you do see people, they want to have a chat. So you just be heads down, headphones on, smash it out. But and it wasn't always
heroin.
Well, it wasn't always fun. You're a little bit jealous of the family heading off to a rock pool or a waterfall or a hike. But it afforded us other opportunities then too. So then we could say, great, we're going on that, iconic experience because, this has kept the bills coming. We're paying the bills. We're making this possible. So it was something I was proud of doing.
With all the different places that you've traveled, Andrea, you talked about being in Canada, you lived in the States for a while, you've been in France and obviously throughout Australia. What similarities do you find across people are there in terms of like what we think about, what motivates us, all of that? Are there similarities that really stood out to you as a storyteller?
Gee, we're all really motivated by the same things, love, comfort, safety. we really do want the same things no matter your living situation. We all enjoy laughter, happiness. We all need to cry. There's no difference what country you live in, and I know, Beck, you would find that too. There's different ways of expressing it, and there's different traditions that you would call on to, commemorate that. But largely we're all motivated by the same things. And I find people fascinating. I mean, I like being a person, and I like talking to people, and I like listening to people and thinking about what makes them tick, or I'm always fascinated about different people's passions or even backstories. I love that when you travel, you can taste these great meals, you can see great views, you can click the box and check in at amazing, iconic places. But what really makes, a travel experience is the stories you learn and the stories you hear, the people you meet. And that's what I love about the whole travel experience. And I think back to all of the places I've lived and worked in, and I'm always reflecting on the people that made those memories. Once or twice there might have been an animal in there or kind of something weird that happened with the scenery, but mostly it's the people.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like last year I spent 3 months in Serbia living with my son and working over there, and it's exactly what you said. People have so much similarity no matter where you're from on earth, and it may be expressed differently, but it's all about the relationships and the stories that you learn from the relationships in every country that you go to.
And I loved following your trip back. It took me back a little bit to living in France where I didn't know anyone, and remembering that trepidation of how you sort of find your groove with other people too. And it's not an easy road, but it's really worthwhile, particularly even more so sometimes when you reflect back.
I think it was you who said, take a week or two to settle into the new culture, and then you'll find your way. So that's good advice.
Yeah. And I think the thing about any form of travel is you have to get to a point where you have to suspend what you know and what's familiar to you and just open yourself up. I sound a bit sort of woo-woo there, but I mean just open yourself up to new things you're going to experience and learn and have a bit of fun with it. When I lived in Canada, I became an avid twitcher, a bird watcher, and I don't necessarily do it at home, but in Canada I was all about birding because I just went, this is a whole new thing to learn.
That is so cool. I love that.
In France, I was, all about sort of, skiing all the time and just obsessing about the freshest of powder. So I think it gives you a chance to try different lives and different ways of being, which is great.
Just go and be open to it.
Yeah. And I've been thinking about that a lot in these current coronavirus times because obviously travel isn't as open to us all at the moment. And, there's a little bit of perhaps grief or disbelief that goes with that for a while that won't be our lives or maybe our children's lives where we were hoping it would be for them. And so when I've been thinking about that, I've been thinking about, how I take that sense of wonder and fantastic sense of adventure and apply it to my own neighbourhood or community or backyard as well. And some of that is a little bit hard to sort of quite imagine, but, it might be we're seeing different things in society all the time. People are going, I'll become a baker with my sourdough or I'll become a gardener in the backyard. And so I'm sort of trying to shift some of that. I've started to chat to the bee rescue neighbours over the back fence because I didn't know much about bees and now I do. So, I think it's just taking that and finding something new to learn or to enjoy and have a wonder about.
Yeah, we've definitely been doing some outdoor rock climbing, my son and I, and exploring some of the local areas, which is really interesting.
That's fantastic.
Sarah, what have you been doing?
You know what? Andrea, I was thinking when you're talking about bird watching, someone introduced me to that when I was like 18. My really good girlfriend of mine, her parents, and I thought that is the corniest thing I ever heard, right? But what happened was I said, that's a blackbird. And she looked at me and she goes, it's black, but it's not a blackbird. I said, how do you know the difference, right? But what it did was it taught me to look small. like to look at the details. And I realized you look small. The first thing starts small. And if you're up in the mountains where there's rocks, they're all small. But then all of a sudden it's so beautiful. So I think I've done that in my neighborhood as well. I'm glad you said it may sound woo-woo, but I walked around and the cottonwoods are dropping their little white things right now. And I'm not allergic to them, so they don't annoy me. But they almost look like little fairies floating on the air. And so I'm thinking, well, that's kind of cool. I've also become chief cook for most of the meals here, which, you know what, that wasn't my gig. I don't mind doing it. I don't mind doing it when I feel like doing it.
Yes.
But it's like, hey, what's for dinner? I'm thinking, that's not funny anymore.
Same. I hear you on that. I really hear you on that. Oh,
so my response now is vegetables. Anybody want anything different? We're having vegetables. What would you like to go with it, right? Because then they'll figure out the rest of it, because I'm always up for veggies. So
that's a good strategy.
I've just been trying to keep humor. Honestly, what I've been doing is digging in a lot more to the time I have to rethink what I want to put back into my life when we get a little more openness going. And really, Andrea, like this whole thing, co-hosting with Beck, was a creative thing. It was kind of like, let's do something different. We've got the time to try it out and see how it goes. And so I've been trying to add in the creative things that I had been like, when I get time, I will do those things. It's like, now's a good time.
That's what I've loved about being really inspired by people like you guys during this time, that you just sort of saying, let's give something a crack that we normally haven't done. And let's just, we've got nothing to lose. So let's see what we'll gain from it. And I've enjoyed seeing so many different people go in really different directions, but maybe not that different. They've just had a little bit more of space to explore and experiment. Yeah. And it's really motivating to go, I could do this too, maybe, in this space. And
it really is. Yeah.
And the irony is that honestly, nothing's different, right? We had the time and we had the space, but we told ourselves, no, we've got to stay doing what we're doing because blah, 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 whatever. We make up these really interesting stories that stop us from kind of going forth. But then all you need is like someone like, I think, what would be fun? And this is really how, formal I am. I want to do this. Beck would be fun. Let's see. But
I love that.
Beck and she goes, I'm up for it.
I love it because as much as you're strategic and you're doing great work in the world, you still are following your intuition and finding what is fun for you, finding what feels good. And that's important as women. I mean, anything.
It is. So we're going to start wrapping this up a little bit. And we want to ask you, Andrea, you have a really generous free offer for everybody in the listening audience, which is going to be a large number of folks. Could you share more about that?
Sure. Well, so I do a lot of newsletter writing with not-for-profits and a lot of unpacking of their of their narrative and their purpose as well. So a lot of the not-for-profits I work with are sometimes stuck with what stories do we need to tell? What do people actually want to hear that's new and fresh? So a lot of the times I'm sort of revisiting newsletter content. So I've got a newsletter health check offer where I give people the opportunity to share their past newsletters with me. I do a little bit of an audit and assessment of how they're traveling with the content and the audience they're talking to. I identify some gaps where perhaps they're missing some opportunities, and I look at things like developing some content that will address some more of the pain points for the people that would normally support or be engaged with their charity. And then I sort of come up with some sort of more engaging headlines that will draw people into the copy and some very specific call to actions as well. This health check that I use is sort of a fairly strong template that people can then take away. I love helping where I can, and I think the great thing is people often overlook or get a little bit exhausted with addressing their blogs or their newsletters and sort of do that. Oh, my goodness, I'm here again. What am I going to say? So sometimes it's nice to have someone come in with that fresh eye and there's sort of I call myself the newsletter cheerleader, so to speak, and sort of, I like to root for your cheerleader, for your newsletter, and tell them that and reassure clients that, there is a space for your newsletter to work and to help bring in that audience or those funds that you need.
I love that. And where can people find that newsletter health check link?
Sure. They can pop onto my website, andrearowe.com.au, and it's at the moment, I think if you sign up for my newsletter, you actually do get a link through to it, or you can just pop a message through on my contact page and I will tell you more about it and send that little form through as well.
Fabulous.
Well, I really want to thank you for all your time today, both of you. Andrea, I just have so much enjoyed meeting you and how diverse you are. And
you too.
I just think it's inspirational, and that you give hope to folks who think they have to be all to everything. And even as you're talking about the newsletter checkup, I'm going, just have someone tell you that your newsletter doesn't suck. Right? Because sometimes, truthfully, you work on something, you're thinking, I'm not even putting this out. And then to have someone just objectively go, here's where it's good. This is a couple tweaks you could make, and it would be more consumable, and you'd be speaking to who you think you're speaking to. So that's such a value add, folks. And I really hope that you take Andrea up on her offer. So when you get a ton of people, let us know. We'll want to know.
Oh, I'd love to. And I think the thing about having a newsletter supporter is it's all about having someone recognise and respect the work you've already done or the journey you've come on so far, but respond with some sort of more helpful suggestions that you can feel ownership and confidence about moving forward as well. So it's always good fun to be a part of that.
Absolutely.
And to be part of this chat.
Oh, yeah. I had so much fun. And if you had fun listening to this chat as well, please remember to share this podcast with someone else that you think will get value from this conversation. And Sarah, remember to...
Well, if you like what you heard, and we'd appreciate if you would review the podcast also, because, your positive reviews, you heard us read a couple today, and we've done it a few times before, but really that does help get the word out to more people. And our goal really is to help more people have the life that they want, do the work that's meaningful to them, live from their passion, and in short, just help people live a no labels, no limits, no excuses life, because it's doable.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic vision coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. So please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Until next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.